Welcome. I'm David Levi Strauss, chair of the art writing program here at the School of Visual Arts. This is the first event of the season of Quixote Talks, and we're very pleased to have Teju Cole and Emmanuel Iduma here for Words for Pictures, a conversation on looking, writing, and breaking form. Next month, October 18th, the writer Maza Mangista will join us. Teju Cole is an award-winning novelist, essayist, the New York Times Magazine's photography critic, an art historian, and an internationally exhibited photographer. And Emmanuel Iduma is a writer of fiction and nonfiction and is on our faculty here, having graduated from the program in 2015. Although it's accurate to say that Teju Cole is a writer and a photographer, that doesn't get us very far. The next thing is to say that he puts words and images together in extraordinary ways. And that's maybe a model for something larger, since he crosses and combines all kinds of media, sometimes in collaborations, so that these combinations become much more than their constituent parts. I've always thought that the word and image marriage or mashup is the seed of everything in art and communication, and that's also where Emmanuel Iduma comes into the conversation. His second book, A Stranger's Pose, is coming out soon in October, and it combines words and images to tell tales, on-the-road tales, and to open up the experience of the traveler and the stranger. And the book appears with a foreword by Teju Cole. When Teju and I first corresponded and talked about Emmanuel, Teju said that Emmanuel gets what's at stake. And in an interview I read, Teju said, "It's about trusting subjectivity as a mode of ethical discourse." Please welcome Teju Cole and Emmanuel Iduma.
How did this happen? It's nice to be in the presence of all you fine folks, the many people we know and the ones we're going to get to know. Thank you for the introduction, Levi. Many introductions, a good introduction generally is not really true about you. It's giving you something to aspire to. But this one does even more, because it just reminded me of how much those words apply actually to you, and in addition to giving me something to aspire to. So thank you very much. I can see Emmanuel anytime I like. It's one of the great privileges of my life that we both live here and we're friends. But it's special to be having the kinds of conversations that we actually normally have, to be having them in front of an audience. So thank you all for being here with us.
Thank you. How do we start? I think the first thing to say in response to Levi and to Teju is that I think 3 years ago now we had a conversation together at the big theater, and I remember feeling sandwiched among two of my heroes, and the idea was to sort of be the fly on the wall, to listen to people who I had read closely and whose thinking and work had shaped mine. And I'm still doing that. And I have the added privilege not only of, working for Levi now, so he's my boss, and I hope I'm in his good books, but also getting to become close to Teju. And I don't take those two things for granted, actually. And I feel that my writing and my thinking has evolved greatly since that conversation, especially because the proximity I feel to both of them. So it's going to be a long time before we finish our conversations.
Yeah, I hope so.
I hope
too.
We start well tonight.
Yeah. Well, if your writing and thinking has improved in the past 3 years, mine has actually gotten worse. Just for political and national reasons. Yeah. I don't have to go into it. I feel like my mind is falling apart. But that reminds me, this sort of like crossways motion reminds me of a line that we've both sort of thought about quite a bit this year. Is the title of this newly rediscovered John Coltrane material that then was released as an album, both directions at once.
Yeah.
You know, and I know it's something that you've also sort of cited.
Yeah.
And how does that title come about? It's something Coltrane said,
Yeah.
right? In conversation with Wayne Shorter, and it was something like, he's talking about breaking form, right? A musical exploration. He's at this point in his career where he's trying to figure out what's next, and he says the thing is to start the sentence in the middle and then move in both directions at once.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the kind of insight that knocks you back into a sitting position before you even understand what it means, right? The sheer emotional impact of it arrives before its whatever its semantic meaning might be, you know, both directions at once. There's an immediate truth in that. Something about sheer potentiality, keeping the possibility of not going down the road and then at some point branching, but beginning with the branch. Start in the middle and immediately start layering it, which for me feels like precisely what we might wish to do when we think about words for pictures, right?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is one of complexity, I think. And, when people write, I'm sure people have written you and people have written me to say, oh, your writing is, it's beautiful. That's, one thing to begin with. And I'm always like, what does beauty mean? What do you mean by beautiful? Or it's lyrical or it's poetic? But then some people also add the fact that it's hard to read. And I've always wondered, I promise you I don't make it intentionally hard to read. And I don't know if you make yours intentionally hard to read. But the question for me is always, what is this push, in a sense, against complexity? What does complexity mean? And also, how do you, I guess, inhabit complexity in such a way that the writing and the thinking is accessible?
Right.
Yeah. So when I first saw that sentence, actually, I was preparing. I just read this piece about John Coltrane, and I was writing about Akimbode Akimbi, who is a photographer, Nigerian photographer we both love. And he had said something when I had asked him about his biography and how he would wish to describe himself, and he said, "I don't like moving from A to B, from point A to B. I would prefer to move from point A to point Z and back to point B." And so the notion of complexity in telling a story, where you're not trying to resolve, but perhaps to unravel,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And a kind of indirection that could be taken for misdirection.
Yeah.
But is actually maybe non-direction. It's sort of giving up, again, what is mechanical and what is rigid, right? So I know, and maybe we can look at some images, but one of the things we've been thinking about is this rather conventional mechanical way of having a picture and then you sort of establishing the fact-checkable facts about that picture, right? Having the words for the picture be a kind of appendage to the picture. Rather than something relational between a text that has its own coherent activity and a picture that is not resolved by the text that you have put to it, but that what actually can emerge is the spark from their encounter. You've brought two energies together, and now neutrinos. So maybe we should look at this image and then just.
Should we start with this?
I think so. I mean, I think
So this is a photograph by Rahima Gambo, and she's a Nigerian photographer who has sort of gotten a lot of attention and acclaim, deservedly so, for the body of work she's doing in relation to Boko Haram. What I find, and I wrote, something about her work and her thinking as part of, a year-long project I'm doing profiling Nigerian artists, and what was particularly moving for me about her work was this push against documentary modes of working with with images around trauma, right? Mm-hmm. So she was very clear that she didn't want to go into parts of the northeast of Nigeria where Boko Haram sort of like have attacked schools especially, and to make this straightforward images of, oh, these are the victims of this attack, right? And she was thinking of ways to both enact the impact of trauma on the body of these girls, for instance. And so in this image, she's just like giving them a prompt, like play one of the games you play during breaks at school, and let's see what happens when I just spend time with you and try to, picture you playing. And for me, I was because I had spent time with her thinking about what she was doing with this. These girls that she would never meet again. And she also acknowledges that she's from a very privileged family, right? And she's going into these places where she would never meet these girls again, maybe after the photographs were taken. And I said, what does it mean to be an interlocutor, right? To stand not just like as a photographer with the camera, which I believe is an apparatus of interlocution, right? It's standing between, let's say, you and an I, but also, what does it mean to be a stranger or to encounter people when you never, again meet them?
Right, and the way that documentary has been so established as how we encounter people in places like that, then becomes something that shuts down the possibilities. Absolutely. Right? Yeah. And so it's not just that we're expected to approach trauma with documentary techniques, but that especially in that place, especially in that context, in a Nigerian context, in a Boko Haram context, it's as if documentary is the only important thing. So so she's pushing against something quite important there. It's just a gorgeous image as well. Yeah.
I mean, I just remembered, and maybe this is a prompt to read the first thing. I just remember that you just got back from Oslo.
Yeah, I did. I just did. Yeah.
And you spent time on an island where there had been a mass shooting.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Yeah. So maybe I can address that a little bit. I was invited by the Literature House in Oslo to do a 2-week residency there. I was doing a bunch of different things. My essay collection had just come out in Norwegian, so I had an event around that. I did a presentation of a project I'd done called Black Paper, which was based on a soundscape, and I did an audiovisual presentation of that, and I had a conversation. I had a conversation with Nadifa Mohammed and Valeria Luiselli about precarity and the border. But my capstone event was supposed to be a lecture based on my 2 weeks in Norway. I mean, this had been proposed to me. Because I'm crazy, I said yes. I'm going to give an hour-long lecture in Oslo to Norwegians about Norway. In Norway, I mean, because 2 weeks is all it takes to be an expert in a place. Ask any of your white friends. So I thought, hell, I'll do it. And in addition, I wanted to make some images as well, But of course, once I had been to Norway once before. It was my second visit. But once I got there, very quickly I realized that, I sort of do my usual thing of trying to find sort of the tender spots on the skin of the society, the places where the trauma is not quite resolved. But also that this was an opportunity to try to think beyond my usual form. So one of my professional questions for myself is, okay, well, after Blind Spot, where I had sort of these texts responding to these images that are about many different countries in the world, what next? Where am I going with it? It doesn't even have to be a new project, but where is that energy pushing? And so can we go to, I don't know what order these things are in. the island where Anders Behring Breivik shot 69 young Norwegians dead on July 22nd, 2011, is called Utøya, and it's about 45 minutes from Oslo. Thank you. And I went. Can you just make it full screen, actually? And I went there, and I spent a day there. And so I have some images from that island, and I have some images from my time in Oslo. But what I did for my lecture was that of the 17 images that I made in my time there, that I selected, I had them in a kind of a slideshow. I had 34 texts, short texts, essayistic. My essayistic technique, I mean, I usually can't get away with it in the Times, but elsewhere my essayistic technique is fragmentary, and that's usually what. So I had these 34 fragments on various aspects of my being there, and I printed each one out on a different sheet of paper, folded each one up, and threw them into a box, so that the lecturer was pulling one at random, reading it, put it into a new box, and taking the next one. And then I had 17 sheets that just said, go to the next image. And what this attempted to do was to break down the one-to-one relationship between text and image, and also the regular sequence of images, because sometimes go to the next image occurred 3 times in a row. And then sometimes I read 10 texts, and we were still on one image. And I think the idea there was that instead of having a text explicate an image, to recognize that these images made in this period of time belong in a certain universe of concerns, and the same thing with the narratives as well, so that it is just this cloud that is then aleatoric in the way it is being dispersed. So that made me nervous, but it was fine. So I'm just going to read 6 random images, the text to go with this. 1. She tastes rocks. She works up north near Svalbard, putting small rocks to her tongue. By taste, you can identify which are calcified, which, in other words, are not mere rocks, but possibly fossils. The country is old. There was life here. Life of a different kind is in the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, an ark for the future of humanity. There will be life here. It is a construct of optimistic pessimism, of pessimistic optimism, a vault that imagines a cataclysm yet to come. Norway hosts this vault on behalf of humanity, a thought experiment made real in the keeping of the earth, a lever point. The paleontologist is married to Andreas. 2. The summer has been dry, the fields look scorched, as blonde as the groups of women I will later see walking down Bogstadveien. He tells me that if there had been any doubt before, if the rules of evidence about climate change were sufficiently complex that one couldn't say of any given weather spike that it was caused by climate change, all such doubt was now gone. This was the first year, he said, that one could say for sure and fear no contradiction that the climate had changed, that without a doubt things were getting hotter. While he speaks, I watch a man walk across a field, lit by the glare on the spinning globe. 3. On the way back, and I should mention that over the course of my time there, I met 4 different men named Andreas. So each time I refer to Andreas in these things, nobody ever knows which Andreas I'm talking about. On the way back, on the ferry back, we are 3 on the ferry. I ask Andreas if he thinks that the man taking us across, and it was also he who had brought us inbound, if he thought this same man had brought the killer across that day. Andreas is quiet for a moment. There's great stillness on this water across which dozens swam that evil day in hopes of safety. Then he says, it could be him. He has worked here for decades. It's likely to be him. I wouldn't want to ask. 4. Ut for out, Öja for island. The outer island, the outermost and smallest of 3. Störöja, Big Isle, Jäitöja, Goat Isle. Later I am surprised to find that many of the people I talk to in Oslo have not been to Utöya. 40 minutes from Oslo, but it is like a mythical island. It has been thought and dreamed and argued about and wept over. Just before going, I attempt to talk myself out of it. Why would you go there? Why would you do such a thing? To see what? To do what? But I know this voice by now, a constant counterpoint to the other voice that always wants to go where things happened. I leave the books largely unread, the books I might read later, but I want to feel the terrain. Andreas has driven me. We arrive on a fine day in late August and are met by Jürgen, who directs activities on the island. Walking around this small island as still in the August air as a held breath, walking on the lover's path along the water and above the low cliffs where 11 young people lay down in stillness by the water pump, hoping he would not notice them, where he walked up on their prone bodies and began shooting. Out here on the out island. I'll end with 5. Out here on the Tyrifjorden, I recall that Homer does not say blue anywhere in the Odyssey or the Iliad. A perfect blue day, a blue so overwhelming that it is like the blue before language for blue arrives. The cafeteria stood and now stands under the blue sky. It is surrounded by the Heinhusse, a shield house whose columns of thicker wood are 69 in number, the slenderer columns surrounding them, 495. The dead, 69 of them, hold up the roof. The living, 495, surround the dead. Only humans do this. We shield our dead. They keep us sheltered. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. I think my response to that is going to be also series of fragments that I've been writing since I think November last year, and I had started, thinking about how to write about my encounters with artists, right? And I was very interested in the idea of profiling, right? So you're thinking about the process of an artist. You're thinking about how they make the work they are making. And I was thinking, okay, what is my
profiling means something else in America, right?
I know.
Okay.
I know.
Okay.
And I was thinking to myself,
but do you know that profiling meant something else in the 90s?
Yeah. No, I didn't know that.
Okay, yeah. So.
No, but I use it in the sense of profiling.
Okay. Because there's also profile in front.
Yeah.
Go on, I'm interrupting.
Okay, go on. Okay.
Yes, sorry.
Where was I?
You were profiling artists.
I was profiling artists. So what is my own process in relation to art, in relation to writing about artists? And so I've been writing these things mainly on Instagram, actually, called Mirror Notes, right? And it's the idea of reflecting my the self-portrait of language itself is what I'm thinking of it as.
Right.
And the first one is somewhat connected to what you've just read. And I wrote it on May 14 this year. Am I in my life story or outside of it? Does it enfold me or do I watch it unfold? When the force of these questions become unbearable, she thinks of her mother. Then in 80s Uganda, and now over the phone, she listens to Ma recount stories from books. They advance chapter after chapter for weeks or months, as long as it takes the older woman to complete her reading. If her mother is too slow to finish and she dares read the book by herself, the experience a shock one, a bad attempt at translation. Suppose we didn't have the stories of others to consider. Could our lives advance with little complication, like strands of an unfastened knot? No life is a single story. No action is without an echo. remembered or imagined, the stories of others inflect ours and dreams and thoughts, bearing consequence. Like this we regard the pain of others. Like this we aren't alone. And I'll read a few more. I wrote this on February 17, 2018. If your grammar is at home in time, it is inappropriate to use the future tense in a subordinate clause when the verb in the main is in the future tense. It is incorrect to say, I will let you know when I will return. One should say, I will let you know when I return. S told me, in 1997, my brother, 20 years at the time, left home without a trace. This year he is 41. When I send you an SMS and write, Bros, I am calling out for my brother. Bear with me as I romanticize this. All my life I have been in search of brothers. At home, we now manage to speak of the possibility that he might not return, as if to speak about him in the past tense would scuttle the prospects of his return. And even then, we are careful to keep the tense vague. There's one more sad story. February 15, 2018. Yesterday, she told me of 3 documents in her life that, taken in sum, could be tendered as evidence of everything she knows of herself. 1. A poem she wrote as a 5-year-old on her parents' bed. While they entertained guests at the dinner party, she wrote of carrying a box in her heart. In her later life, her paintings began to contain box-like forms. 2. A letter she wrote to her grandmother, sent back once the matriarch passed away. She remembers writing this around her 8th birthday, lying on a terrazzo floor. At the moment of recollection, the words of her letter were out of reach, but they had found it in her grandma's desk the day she died. 3. An undated letter she sent to her grandma's sister, after whom she had been named. When I think of your husband's death, I cannot eat. Her grand-aunt sent back the letter to her when her partner died. Think about it, she said to me. I sent a consolatory letter to myself even before I was bereaved. A perfective verb denotes completed action. Suppose a life is structured as one, expressing an action, yet considering itself in retrospect, not in deferred, completes each instant. Life lived as in a prophecy. What she knows of herself, she has always known. I think 2 more. January 27. Meanwhile, the woman said, I am living in my name as in a prophecy. When he named me, my father was casting about for a word or two that testified to the circumstances of my birth. When I look back at how I have lived, and when I imagine how I might live, I cannot escape the meaning of my name. But pay little attention to that, for my mind is weakened by reflection. I must incline you towards a meanwhile, a moment I cannot defer. I speak of, how else to put it, an interregnum between when I was named and when my destiny catches up with me. How do I live in this time? And finally, January 20. Not guile, clarity, not theft, reclamation, the trifecta of kindness, knowledge, and generosity, not to display intellectual confidence, to profit, not introversion, a word left on the tip of a tongue, not laziness, disaffection, not unbelief or loss of faith, a believer in search of proof, the distance between a word and the memory it conjures, not a literary genre, a calisthenics of forms, not darkness, waiting for light to arrive, not a lack of information, an excising restraint, the precise space a semicolon occupies on a page, the meaning it encompasses. It will be called semicolon, right? Not semicolon.
So many things are sparked by the moral seriousness, but also precision of your language here. But one of the first things that comes to mind is that these are things that you're actually offering on Instagram, on social media. And of course, what it makes me think about is that, the slow motion nervous breakdown that I've been having over the past couple of years. I don't know about you guys. A significant part of it is triggered by encounter with language that's deadly in more ways than one. Yeah. Deadly not only because of its real world impact, people at the border, militarily, the kinds of supports that residents here need for their lives, but also deadly in the kind of violence it's doing to language, right? It feels also that among the very many things that are at stake, language is very much one of them. Not just a bad person, but a person who is treating language and the kind of work language can do extremely badly, worse than anybody I can think of in my experience. And we have to encounter a lot of it. Yeah. You don't have to follow him on Twitter to encounter that language all the time and then have it be part of your bloodstream, right? So there has to be like some superior counter to that, so that now one arrives at a meaningful, focused, prophetic, loving, fierce, concentrated language as a person dying of thirst might take the very first, sip of water. It has gone from something merely informative to something actually that's a matter of survival, which should be a kind of positive pressure on those of us who do writing, to know that this has actually become, in a way, life-saving work, because the linguistic faculty is being destroyed inside people, of having to read this stuff and where the first thing is, oh, this is horrible, and then the second thing is, what does it wait, what?
Yeah.
It's full of so many unintended ambiguities.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going off. It's not really a tangent because it's so central to like part of what's so distressing about this, and what is so appealing and helpful about language that seeks to work elsewhere. And it's also something to do with the relationship between overstatement and understatement, right? Or the relationship between the obvious and what sidesteps it and goes out elsewhere to try to do its work, right? And you're presenting on social media, where I try to do the same thing sometimes, and I think we do this in the full knowledge that A, there are people to whom it matters, and B,
we don't allow comments.
And we don't allow comments because we were raised wise. Wale Soyinka in an interview, who was saying, in a different context, somebody was asking him why he only drinks wine. He doesn't drink water. He really doesn't drink water. And his answer was, well, some people came to wisdom later in life, but some of us came to wisdom very early. So anyway, yeah.
Well, I think
he's a wise man. But at least I think maybe we have enough wisdom to know that the endless chatter. Yeah,
that's not the kind of work that you want an immediate response to. I think that's what it is for me. And then, I had this conversation recently, where someone was, taking me to task, of course, like, why don't you allow comments? That's so snobbish. Are you a proud person? I'm like, yeah, I'm a proud person. Yeah. Of course I'm a proud person.
Yeah.
And I said, well, Instagram created that feature. I didn't create it.
That's
it's
right.
actually possible that you can,
You can switch them off.
you can switch your comments off.
Yeah.
And I think we are getting to the day when it's possible not to like photos anymore, right?
That would be awesome.
That would be great.
That would be
Right.
great.
When maybe, everybody has gotten verified on Instagram. You can apply now to get verified, by the way. So if you want to get verified, you could fill a form and you get verified. I'm not kidding. This is true. So I think that when everybody...
Can the verified people disable likes?
And maybe. I think that's the future. That's what I'm saying. Like once everybody's
Don't
verified,
tempt
you could disable likes. But to get more serious, for me, the distinction is between work that is urgent, as you're saying, and work that is immediate. And I think there's a very subtle distinction between those two senses of how one can work, right? So if you're working on Instagram, I'm working in a very urgent manner. I recognize that it's very urgent for me to spend, to have a thought, to kind of, as I think about it, test the fitness of my instincts, right? Or my ideas, right? So I have this, my friend tells me a story, some of my friends are here actually who have stolen stories from, right? They tell me the story. I'm like, I can write it better than you told me. And so I spend, I kind of carry it around for hours, and I spend, maybe an hour writing these things that will end up, I have no other use for it in the moment, except that I know I'm going to kind of try to pair it with an image that I've also been thinking about, and then it will end up on Instagram. I mean, and now that, it's kind of, the project is growing, I'm trying to say, okay, should I actually withdraw from posting these things on Instagram and think about a bigger, but again, it's work that is urgent. It's work that I feel that, and I think it's you that uses analogy once, that someone is going to the bathroom, and they are sort of checking their feed, and then they see an image that makes them stop.
Yeah.
Or like they read a sentence, and I do believe that sentences can save people's life, right? And so they get to this point,
especially
where
the sentence, "Don't shoot." The execution has been called off. Yeah. Anyway,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you kind of like, you're doing something completely quote unquote mundane, right? You wake up.
Yeah.
And the first thing, you reach out for your phone, and you're not thinking that you can stumble on something as intentional. I don't want to even say intelligent, but intentional.
Absolutely.
Right?
Something that works as some kind of pause.
Absolutely.
Right. And that element of surprise in it, that sense of being one, and many of you guys that I can see it, do that also on your feeds. That sense of putting something out into the world that will reach some unknown, some other person out there, and can make some kind of small but substantial difference to them. And then, if we have to navigate through the expectations that people have of what their rights are to your stuff, like I should have the right to leave comments on it, well, that's the fight we're going to have. But I do know that for myself, when I'm making work, the moment it's seen, it changes. The energy of it changes. I see more in it the moment I make it visible. Somehow my ability to judge whether it works becomes instantly sharper the moment I let it out into the world. Yeah. And so to have it in a place that is a little bit less formal actually then becomes part of the editing process. Yeah. Right. We're talking about stories, and I just heard one, and I want to share it very quickly.
Yeah.
My mom was telling me this story. My mom and a friend of hers were having this conversation just about kingship in Yoruba land. And I thought, wow, what a marvelous story. It has been, and I promise this story doesn't have anything to do with anything we've been talking about so far. It's just a good story. Short story. The king dies, and of course there's ceremonies for the new king, somebody from the ruling families. And I believe this was the Oni of Ife, Shijuade, and I think that was maybe 1980 that he comes to power.
Yeah.
And of course, in the really, really traditional sort of strongholds of Yoruba kingship, well, traditional things happen, such as, there's, in some places there's the guy who has enjoyed some of the privileges of proximity to kingship, and when the king dies, well, that guy, they just won't find him anymore. Oh, what happened to that guy who used to hang around here? Oh, who knows? Right. So, Abobaku, those who die with the king. But this story was that I think it was often in the Ife system, it was often arranged in such a way, the way that the Abobaku met his death. The one who had to accompany the old king in his new journey was after the new king came to power, and he went into the inner chamber to do the necessary rituals. He would walk out backwards out of the room, and the first person he encounters, the person who's basically been put there, would not be killed, would fall dead and satisfy the ritual requirement. And so this happened in 1980. But what happened was that the Abobaku, in the ceremonies celebrating the arrival of the new king, he wasn't shirking his duty. He had too much to drink and did not show up at the appointed place. Now, the king was already sort of like a good time Charlie. He was a fine boy living life in Lagos before he was summoned to take his his throne. And so he had come from Lagos with all his homeboys, Ikoyi Club guys, you know, all the Lagos Country Club homies he was hanging out with. And they sort of, and those guys were there, they were sort of also partying. And apparently one of them, some guy called Bobo Doherty,
That's a familiar name.
was the guy who sort of stumbled in that room. The king reversed out of the rituals, and that was the person he encountered. And Bobo Doherty fell down dead. And he was like a famous socialite. It was like a page 6 kind of figure. No, I mean, really, he was like known. So like once people heard like Bobo Doherty died, like how could that happen? We were just with him at the party. And I said, well, Mom, he didn't just, drop down dead, right? I mean, my mom was like, no, he definitely died. And my mom's friend was like, no, this is how it happens. They see the king, and whoever sees the king first dies. I'm like, yeah, I know. But really, whoever sees the king first dies. I mean, obviously there are people waiting in the wings to grab this guy and make sure the necessary is done. And they were like, no, you don't understand. You see the king, you drop down dead. That's just the power of the ritual. And I said, okay. So that's how Bobo Doherty died in 1980. It was...
Well, my question.
Story.
Well, let me ask a question that would unravel this mystery. Is so you've worked on 4 books,
Mm-hmm.
and all in different genres.
Yeah.
What has it become more difficult for you to work on new books? It's a very simple question, but I'm obsessed with
The only
Yeah,
difficult
with that.
book is the one I have under contract. That's the only difficult book. The others are easy.
The others that you've written or that you're writing?
The ones that I'm working on. I mean, they're not easy, but I just find that the most important thing by far is freedom. Is to defend those spaces where whatever energy you have can manifest itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as I've gone on in my career, I've had, paradoxically, I've had more freedom. I was worried that I would have too much to lose and I would start getting more conservative in my thinking, my gestures, but quite the contrary. I mean, I am by this point sort of used to the bitter disappointment of those who say, "What are you working on?" And I tell them what I'm working on, and then a small beat, and then they say, "So, are you gonna do a novel?" And I say, "Well, I haven't ruled it out."
Yeah.
And the man in the scripture, and they walk away sorrowful, knowing that they cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Yeah, so people are really disappointed that I'm not doing a sequel to Open City or whatever, but I'm happy with the projects I'm doing.
Well, so you wouldn't think that you've been writing fiction? I think you've been writing fiction.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that the categories interest me less and less, truly. And something wants to come out into the world, and you want to be the person who helps that happen. So for example, right now, you saw that picture of those people who were in a refugee camp. That's a photograph by Fazal Sheikh, American photographer whose work has largely been around displaced peoples in various places, in Palestine, in Kenya, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and all over. And now he's actually doing a project on in New Mexico, in Utah. And I'm working with with him on a book where it has some of the energies of what I did in Blind Spot, but in this case, the pictures are all by him, and the texts are by me. And some of you might have seen some of those texts, because now I'm returning to this question of who is kin to me, who is a stranger, who belongs. So my text is not sitting right on top of his pictures, but my text is a kind of a report from this past year and a half of American life and the various ways in which we estrange, And so is that fiction? Does it matter? What it is feels like a necessary project. So we're working on editing that book now.
Yeah, I think we should open it up for questions. Actually.
Yeah, I think so.
Because it's 40 minutes in.
Time flies.
Yeah.
Normally we have about 6 hours and and things to drink. Yeah.
So I mean, as you know, the conversation is fairly open-ended, and I think that what I'm hoping for with the Q&A, if that's what it's going to be, is some kind of like prompts to even like extend what we've been talking about and thinking about. So, yeah, please help us.
Yeah.
You started off talking about music, Coltrane, and complexity. Do you think it translates so easily between the music and the writer, the task of the musician and the task of the writing? Can you actually bring them together like that?
No one can write like Coltrane in every possible sense. Partly because we can't write like music, and partly because there is only one St. John Coltrane, right? But some of the things they have in common, for example, are that each genre, once it becomes marketable, will find nodes of comfort, and it'll settle into form, right? And then the form becomes what you can sell. For me as a writer, the kind of inspiration that Coltrane can offer is, how do you, at least in the moment of creation, sidestep the voice of buying and selling and get somewhere else? I never hear in his tone anything that would make me feel he thought, we'll really...
That's the formula.
That's a formula, I remember, when he was like, he felt he had to get back into the woodshed, because he said, I found myself thinking I need another favorite things. And he knew immediately that this was poison, I know favorite things, in fact, is amazing, because he takes the banal and sentimental and he turns it into sublime. But already for him, the idea that to find another banal and sentimental American song and turn it into sublime, even just having the formula was bothering him. So so it's not so much a translation as an opening up of a possible way of thinking about the work you do, right? everywhere. This is Mick Tosick. I don't have to tell him about freedom. I remember reading you in 1999 and thinking, fuck, he's in the academy and he can still write like that? You know, maybe there's hope, you know, so.
There's hope. Yeah,
You know?
he actually, there's a mimesis and authority. Yeah, he starts with a note to the academy, which I always found interesting.
You file that under shit you can do when you have tenure.
Yeah, but I think, for instance, of someone like who we both love, Fela, right? And of course, you know, my prompt to every Nigerian is always, who is your favorite Fela? And what is your favorite Fela? And, you know, people say all kinds of things.
What's yours?
Teacher, don't teach me nonsense.
Beast of no nation.
Siddhartha's
is look and laugh.
But, you know, I promised you that when I was in school here, I used to play Teacher, don't teach me nonsense. And it was...
It was oppositional.
It was this attempt to, you know, decolonize.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
To put it mildly. But I mean, but for me, the sense of, I don't think there's, you know, the idea of translation really is the idea of a ferry, right? Like carrying a cross. And for me, the best, you know, the best composers are people who can give you a sense that something is being transported, right? That this, I mean, especially sensation is being carried from musician or composer to listener. And I've found myself so many times listening to, say, someone like Coltrane, you know, Fela, or listening to even, you know, someone more recent like Benjamin Clementine, and thinking to myself, how is it, or maybe even watching a film by Jonah Comfra, right? You know, and thinking to myself, okay, I need to write an essay like that.
Yeah.
And it's the sense, not necessarily of thinking that there is something in music that I need to understand for my writing, as much as the sense that I'm thinking about this layering, like how is it possible if you're watching a film, an essay film by a Comfra, to achieve that like level of like just, you know, subliminal magic, to put it that way, you know. And that's, you know, I think that's what is possible when one can, you know, basically translates what music does with what writing is capable of doing.
You got to try to get people somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah,
you know,
the sense of a journey. I mean, people would say, "Oh, I read your short story and it didn't end." I'm like, "Why should it end?" You know, it shouldn't end, but it should carry you somewhere. Yeah.
Well, with that inspiration, I'm going to find you something very quickly, and while I look for it, we can. Well, it depends on how fast the internet is here.
I hope it's still connected.
It is. It's a poem by Dickinson I'm thinking of. She uses this phrase, the transport of the aim. And that's how she ends the poem, you know. She says, at least I had the transport of the aim. In other words, even if the poem, the body of work does not actually accomplish everything it sets out to do in terms of radically changing people's lives, she has experienced the transport of having attempted to do that. You know, again, a sense of what's at stake. But it's worth digging out, partly because not enough people know Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson is a person who gives you 7 or 8 lines that you read them and then you have to go lie on the couch and cover your head and spend the rest of the afternoon there. You know, like she'll break your head open. So this one is called, you know, they always title with the first line. I fit for them. I fit for them. I fit for them. I seek the dark till I am thorough fit. The labor's a sober one with this sufficient sweet. That abstinence of mine produce a purer food for them if I succeed. If not, I had the transport of the aim. So,
the next question. Make sure your aim is,
Yeah, that's right. All the way at the back. Yeah.
What do you think of maybe the reevaluation of V.S. Naipaul after his death, given that he wrote it?
What do I think of the re-evaluation of V.S. Naipaul after his death?
Yeah, or his legacy.
Of his legacy?
Yeah.
I don't think there was more of a. I don't think that. The funny thing is, I don't think there was much of a re-evaluation. I mean, I think when it comes to obituaries, people generally are shy about bringing out the negative, and in this case, I didn't see anybody who was, and I think that was absolutely sort of necessary. I mean, I wish people had been half as forthright about John McCain. But American civic religion. You can't go there. I'll go there. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, but Naipaul, what can you say about him that he didn't already say about himself? Next question.
I think we should keep on talking.
Maybe. But surely. Hi.
Hi. Forgive the banality of this question, but I'm curious about the choice of Instagram as a vehicle for the writing. The writing is beautiful, rather than, say, a blog post or some, or, I don't know, or
What's a blog?
okay, it has a bigger audience.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I have a, I guess, tenuous relationship with social media. I mean, I deleted my Facebook and Twitter, and I've had peaceful sleep since then. Great, best thing you can ever do for your life. But I remained on Instagram particularly because I felt that I think it's the best actually social media platform, if I could say that, and that's necessarily because it allows you to post both images and text. I mean, even GIFs or GIFs and videos. You could play around with form more than you could, play around with form with other social media platforms. But the real question is, why put that kind of, I guess, serious writing on Instagram? And
I'm delighted that you did.
What?
I'm delighted that you
Oh,
did.
yeah.
I'm inspired by that idea.
Yeah.
I automatically thought, oh, Jeff could go
Yeah.
start to do an Instagram, a clean Instagram.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, the other thing is like I'm not. I think some people write me to say, but does it mean that you're not working on something else? I'm actually not scared of not working on something else. I feel that this is.
That's something.
It's something in itself, and it's not about again, it's not about the publication as much as my process,
No, I didn't
right?
really want to denigrate.
Oh no, we don't.
No.
We don't sense that you
I
are.
don't think so.
What was
no.
your process?
But
for
it can be sort of strange to people that you put
Yeah.
these hours and hours into something that, after all, is quite evanescent. But
Yeah.
I'm on Instagram because Emmanuel's. I mean, that's where I get to see his stuff. I mean, Yulitha's on. She's on Instagram, and there are people who are on it, and I go there and I'm going to see their stuff and their thinking and the commitment they've made to present this in a particular form. It becomes this balance between audience, quality and size of audience, and the flexibilities that the platform itself offers, because you can't. I mean, if you are really, really interested in catching the wave, you should be on Snapchat, because for the kids, Instagram is already past it, But and I think there are probably people who are already doing very interesting work on Snapchat. I just old enough that I can't quite get the how to master it and make it work for me.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Twitter is a shit show. So, and I should know because I tweeted a lot, but then that was over. And I think I agree with Emmanuel. It's sort of this space that is somehow the volume of noise is just a little bit lower, and there's something about what it allows us to do with pictures and with words. So, But I've always had this belief also that you don't condescend to the audience. You go where people are, you present the work at the highest possible quality, and there's going to be somebody there who responds to it. So that's, most of what ended up being Blind Spot, I tried out on Instagram first.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sometimes it's the paragraph that saves your life when you're trying to start an essay, and you're like, 2 months ago I wrote that good paragraph, and it's on Instagram, so you just hit the delete button.
That's right. It never existed.
And save
Yes.
your good paragraph from extinction.
There you go. And very often, because of the kind of freedom that happens there, I might do something there that then maybe gets a little bit of attention, and then it finally gets to the attention of my editor at the Times, and she'll say, you really could have written that for us. And I really like her, and she really likes me, and we've done a lot of good work together, but I just think quietly to myself, no, I couldn't. Because once it's out, they think, oh yeah, we can publish something that bold and unorthodox. But no.
Not before it's out.
Not before it's out and works in a certain way.
Yeah.
If I came to her with that as a first draft, she would be like, well, I see what you're going for. And then it becomes this conversation that I really don't want to have, because sometimes I just want to shoot my shot and be out of there, so.
Forgive us a little follow-up.
Sure.
I should know this, but don't. If you block comments, which sounds like a good idea in terms of your own energy, do you still know the metrics of how many page hits or something that you've had? How many people have gone to you?
The only way I know the success of any post is, you can't know. I think except you have like a business page or something, which is a bad idea to try. But the only way I know it's a success, my post, it's not even the number of likes, I think, but there's some posts that actually, not success actually, that's a terrible word, but like when it resonates in a certain way or has its own, what's the word, like valence, is that the right word? It's when, people write me, send me a DM. And sometimes, you get like 34 likes and get like 5 DMs. You're like, and you get 106 likes. This is my Instagram, but Teju's Instagram, we are talking, in the hundreds. I get like 100 likes.
But the metric for me is very similar.
Yeah.
Which is the people who say, the people I follow who say, wow, that really helped me in a certain way, then that's wonderful. Or do you have this thing where somebody liking it is worth like 15 other people liking it? Where you're like, I see that, you see that. You know that thing where somebody sees something that you are glad they saw? That is the real metric.
Yeah.
And absolutely, and you might have written it for them, or you might not have written it for them, but then you're super glad that they saw it. Yeah. Those are the real measures,
That's true in life.
Absolutely.
And somebody
absolutely.
across the room.
We could be in Madison Square Garden right now, but we're here with you, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, the first question is easy. Well, not easier, but the first one you asked. The question is, the first question she asked was, I had said that, words, sentences, paragraphs have the capacity to change lives or change your life. Do I think that photographs have that same capacity? The first thing to say is that I didn't mean that in the sense of like this immediate kind of change, right? Like, self-care poetry is what I call it, right? Like this, I love that, it's met me at my point of need, as we'll say in church or something, I don't mean that in that way. Actually, I'm more interested in the silences. I'm more interested in what makes you stop, that is at that moment perhaps untranslatable, and at that moment it's incomprehensible. Actually, that's what I'm interested in when I'm thinking about this possible change in a life, is the moment of pause, right? Which is something Teju had said earlier, the moment where you are like, this is so powerful and profound that I need my entire life. And I don't say that to chip in the effect. I need my entire life to figure this out, right? And this comes from my experience as a reader, actually. You know, when I read, my attraction to books is, regardless of genre, what kind of writing am I reading that makes me stop and want to return? Even if I never return to that book or that essay, but I feel in that moment that is something that I want to come back to. So in the sense of photographs, it's similar, right? How do you get yourself, and I think this is a skill that, this is actually something that can be acquired as a skill, right? How do you get yourself to a place where you're looking at you can basically turn down the noise, right? And have moments of realizing that this photograph requires repeated looking. That is what I mean in terms of change, right? Or like this alteration, and then the second question, which I think
was about going from A to Z and coming back to B. This idea, is it something that is the responsibility? Were we speaking about it in terms of what we do as artists, or the expectation we have of the viewer, of the reader? And it makes me think of the way things often happen. Things often work in the academy, right? The authority structure that's there in the academy. You speak in a neutral voice. It's defensively footnoted, and then you say what it is, and you add to the body of knowledge, and everybody tries to sound like everybody else and use their jargon, and then that's received also in a kind of neutral way, but the hand that gives is above the hand that receives. But what about thinking about the work that image making, writing, and all forms of art, what about thinking about that work as relational? What would that begin to look like? And I think there can be a sort of like a cheap relationality of the comments section, absolutely. I'm not saying all comment sections are bad. Obviously, there are places where things can spark and happen. But this kind of like peanut gallery approach, that's one way. But there's certain kinds of writing that actually say, I'm opening this door, and this work is incomplete until you enter. It's hard to get there. But the work that does that for us, we bind to our hearts. And because it's not manufactured, it's not pro forma, there seems to be consequences to the engagement. If you don't want to be altered, don't enter that door, But there's an appeal on the part of the artist that's saying, I also need you to be part of this, One of the tests I put to my writing is that it has to contain within it the possibility that somebody who is close to it might not just be close to it, but even feel embarrassed by it. Yeah. Because I want to take that risk on that side so that the person who enters it can find something more than a work that does not sort of take that risk. So my answer to the both directions at once is that is a thing we're doing together, a thing we're trying to do together, like church.
Yeah.
At its best. Yeah.
And you see the possibilities of that.
I'm going to only respond to this by reading something to you. I just remembered that I have it, and I haven't read it. I hope I find it. Okay, yeah. And to preface that, I'll say that the work I'm doing actually on Instagram is cop-outs, elegant cop-outs, as I like to imagine. It's a way to avoid doing the actual work. The story I'm writing, the story I'll write, the story I must write, the story I might write, the story I dreamt I wrote, the story I might write while dreaming, the story I tell you I'll write and end up never writing, the story to be written only as a sketch, has to do with form. the miracle of form, the desire to reside in form. And when one has discovered a new form, it is not the form, but the fact that you are the form that is important, writes Carol Marceau. You know, I send these notes as compromise in case I never get to the main thing. The main thing, what I keep secret and pass on occasionally as elusive vignettes, is not known even to me, because when I have written it, I will become what I have written, and how can I speak of what I am intimate with? But there's that homage Mina Loy pays to Gertrude Stein, how, quote, she swept the literary circles clear for future performances. My notes, these public notes in particular, are daily sweepings, a story on the horizon, a faint line where sea meets sky, where thought is having intercourse with feeling. So yeah, that's the answer. That's my answer. I mean, yeah.
That line, where thought is having intercourse with feeling. If only you had lines like that when you were an undergrad in Nigeria.
Oh God.
Jesus.
I
Murder.
I wouldn't have graduated.
I mean, basically. Yeah. You'd also have 3 kids by now. Anyway.
Jesus. Are you saying I should?
I'm just
get
saying
married?
it's a good line.
Okay.
You know, so much of the work, written or image making, is instantaneous or close to instantaneous. When you click the shutter, that's instantaneous. And when you write something, the thought, even though you might revise the language, the thought might be instantaneous, but it's supported by a lifetime, or at least a section of your life has been a preparation for that, right? The glory of American improvised music, aka jazz, is precisely how it makes that manifest, that somebody gets up on the bandstand without a preparation of what they're about to do, except the only preparation has been their entire life, you know? And not just what conservatory, not just the chops on the instrument, not just the woodshedding, but an entire habitus, right? Coltrane sounds like Coltrane because he had 2 black grandfathers who were preachers in South Carolina, 2 of them. No wonder he sounds like that, you know? So the idea that there's this huge mass that then expresses itself like, you know, well, tip of the iceberg or a whale's blowhole or whatever, you know. But the part on the surface, the active part on the surface, sustained by the massive subsurface aspect, is the way I think about the work, so that the work always becomes expressing yourself in that limited form. You don't have to hide any of it. I mean, it's not glib to say there's more where it came from, but most of it is still where it came from. This is just first blood. If I make an image like this one, which is no great shakes to anybody else, for me, the satisfaction in that image is that there's no way I could have made that 10 years ago. And now I look at it and it absolutely looks like me. And anybody who knows my work is like, oh, that's one of yours. You know, but how did that happen? That was just sort of years of, you know, it was years for me to see that the shadow was doing work in conversation with the reflection, in conversation with the actual pole, you know. So give it away.
Yeah.
You know, that's my advice. Give it away. And then you're also free of it, and then other things can also happen. Okay, maybe one more.
Yeah.
That's a complicated question. So I'm going to latch onto the first part of it, you know, which is, okay, so I think the first part of the question, well, there's a question about words and images and about whether which the push or pull and which wants to express, you know, does this idea need to come out as an image or as a thought, as words, and it's a question about calibrating the balance between the two when it's sent out, you know. One of the things I've noticed, something that used to frustrate me very much as a younger artist and as a younger person, and now that's a consolation, is the way masters talk about the art. It used to drive me up the wall. They were just so freaking vague about it. You know, it's like, tell me about the craft. Let's get into the nitty gritty. How did you do that? How did that happen? You know, like people who are at a certain level will like, they'll be able to break it down for you. And then, I don't know, once you get up to Toni Morrison level, it's just sort of like, yeah, something else is happening, right? I mean, you know, you get up to Herbie Hancock level and it's like, yeah. 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 You know, there's a lot of this. And I think the reason for it is because, you know how like all old folks start to like all look the same? You're like, what race is that person even? You know, is that a man or a woman? Like, it could be a black man, it could be a white woman. I don't know. There, you know, when you're like 85, you all sort of look the same. And I think when you're artistically 85, you know, there's like a merging that happens where the things they talk about really do move past this worry of formal means. That had to be mastered. But you sit in a master class with one of these people in any art form, and what sounds like generalities actually is they're getting to the core of why we go to the art in the first place. It's always ends up being some version of the person you are, the person you try to be in your heart, is the most important part of the art that you put out into the world, is the most important part. You know, and that's very hard to talk about in our culture, right? Because it sounds a bit precious, it sounds a bit pretentious, you know, it's not wissenschaftlich enough, you know, insufficiently scientific. You know, how the hell are we supposed to study that in universities if you're just gonna, you know? But I think at the end of the day, these genres, these forms, are just helping us express something that is pre-formal.
Yeah.
You know, and the part of it that helps you, you might even think it's in the form, but the part of it that helps you is also pre-formal. You know, if you cry at a concert and you cry after reading a book, are the tears different? Tears, you know. You might think they are, but the neural pathway is the same. So
yeah, it's also this idea that the alphabets were invented, right, while someone was watching cranes fly in the sky, right? And you think of how we are so fixed and it's become so formal, right? Like these letters, you know, how we write, you know, an A or a B, but how it was invented was just by watching.
it's freer.
You know, so how do you combine that element of I guess like flights with an element of balance and precision, and I feel that when any form of art works is when it can trigger and confirm perhaps a sensation or a feeling. So it's that same idea of thought having intercourse with feeling, because if it were just thought, it's not quite there, and if it were just feeling, it's not quite. I mean, in my you know, my understanding of form, it's not quite there. So it's that like you know, that tension actually between thought and feeling, right? As all intercourse is. That's I can't keep a straight face.
I can see that. Yeah.
Trying to make a lead joke. And I'm usually a very serious person. So it's that tension between thought and feeling that then if you're sort of thinking about it, you know, any form of art, any form of like you know, working with text and images, right? That tension must inherently be there, right? So I don't seek to resolve it. I actually seek to find the tension and explore it. Again, a generality, but
Yeah.
I'm
no,
not
but important. And you know what? Pretty much everything in our environment is trying to oppose this. It's trying to work against this.
Yeah.
It's saying you can't do that. You know, your feelings are showing, your opinions are showing. Too much affect, you know, and especially if you're a person of color, too much affect.
Yeah.
Maybe, why so much affect? Maybe you're not smart enough to be with us, right? Too much, right? And I mean, and this is why it freaks them out until they can accept it. And then they want to own it, you know.
Yeah.
But this is going to be the struggle, whether you're working as an artist, especially if you're in the academy. I think the program here is amazing because this kind of writing can emerge from here. And this is a place that's not ashamed. I mean, everybody has Benjamin on the walls, but they're not ashamed to have John Berger on the walls. That's incredible because, you know, I studied some art history in my time. And, you know, academic art historians don't have much to say to John Berger. He really worries them. Maybe that has changed in the past decade. But I know that they'll sort of teach ways of seeing, maybe, but definitely nothing after that, you know. There was too much feeling afterwards, you know. But we need feeling. I think maybe this is a good place to
Absolutely.
stop. Thank you
Thank
all
you.
very much.